Hi, and welcome to Musings of an Earthbound Alien. In today's episode, I will try and offend as many of you as I can by talking about climate denial. And I'm not the one denying it, but you'll find out in a minute. We'll also talk about recycling and what you can do to help with recycling, and it has nothing to do with putting your plastics in your blue box. It has to do with something entirely different that many of you never realized. I'll also do a recommendation of a book that I thought I would actually never read, and that is Babylon Confidential by Claudia Christian. And in my humble opinion, Life in 5 Minutes or Less, the Fast Food Generation. All right, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we're back. Now, the first topic, as I indicated before, is guaranteed to offend. It will offend you. Now, let's be clear. I'm not doing this to try and offend people. I'm doing this to try and educate people. Those deniers of climate change, those individuals will never change their minds. You may find a few that'll come around at some point in time. Some have, if you look at maybe when they were younger and a little bit more naive or susceptible to influence. As they got older, they started to see some of these changes. Some people actually did change their mind. I know a couple of people personally that have. But 2 out of 1 billion doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. So what I'm trying to do here now is to say to others, look, you always ask the question, why are so many people denying climate change? Well, it's really not that difficult. What is difficult is for some people to hear the reasons, however. But let's see, if I can change somebody's mind, great. If not, I'm not going to worry about it. As long as those people that believe in the science, that believe in the reality and the facts, the day-to-day evidence, if I'm able to put a little bit more education into those minds, then I'm happy. But essentially, denying climate change, the dismissal of the issue, the unwarranted attacks and spreading of doubt that directly contradict the scientific consensus on climate change, seems to be a persistent thread among parts of the population. The fact that this includes the extent to which these groups will go, to which the current adverse, and to counter the adverse changes that are being caused by humans, its effects on nature and human society, or the potential adaptation to the warming of the earth by human action, is disturbing on many levels. The question then is why? Why are so many people denied climate change? Not just denying it, but outright refuting the evidence as false. The reality and facts of the science is irrefutable. There's just no other way to say it. The little technical issue here. It's always going to happen. As I said, the reality and the facts of science is irrefutable. Yet there's a large global population that continues to deny not only that this is happening, but also that the major cause is not due to human activity. Let's start with certain facts, okay? Today, right now, changes in the climate are essentially direct and effect in fires in the Arctic Circle. Many of you don't even realize that there are fires burning in the Arctic Circle, in Siberia, which, yes, is in fact part of the Arctic Circle. Fires in 2019 and 2020 have been burning hotter, longer, over a vast area, much larger than at any other time that you would get normal fires. And when I say normal fires, I'm talking fires that are not human made, as in started by idiots trying to do something stupid, but by lightning strikes and that sort of thing. The Arctic fires are essentially burning tundra, smothering Siberian cities in just thick haze and smoke. This is the second year in a row, for example, that Arctic fires have started as early as they have and are as large as they are. They've never actually been larger up until now. And that's bad news for climate change in the long run, because the fires are releasing record levels of carbon dioxide. They're burning ancient peatlands. Have you ever seen peat? It's like a very fine grass. You ever seen a model railroad set? Well, the grass and the bushes, that's peat, and it's sort of intertwined and it's thick and it burns really well. And this carbon is like a heat sink up to now. It is actually trapped. That peat has actually trapped carbon over thousands and thousands of years of it being there. The amount of carbon that's in the peat right now is large, vast sums. And one reason for, that we're concerned about those fires is the amount of carbon it's releasing into the atmosphere. Climate deniers, don't go there, because I know where you're about to go, and hold off right now before you say anything. One reason for the Arctic fires being as bad as they are is that the Arctic temperatures, that means temperatures above 60 degrees north latitude, in the wintertime and the spring are much warmer than they've ever been. We've seen temperatures even in Canada of plus 30 and above, and 30 degrees Celsius, not 30 degrees Fahrenheit. If you don't know what that is, get a book. This is not a good thing. Research has also shown that many of the fires, once thought to be extinguished, are actually smoldering beneath the ice and snow all winter. Even as a scout back in ancient times, as in the 70s, we knew that fires can burn underground for years below the surface, burning through the roots of trees in forests. You don't see it, you can't smell it, but it's there, and eventually it hits that spot where it comes to the surface. And that's one of the things that researchers are very concerned about now, is that in the peat, it's burned down into the tundra and is now burning underneath that, especially during the wintertime. And in one article in the journal Nature, the way they put it is fires emerged zombie-like in the spring as the snow melted, which again caused that early start of the fire season. They've already been burning under the ground throughout that period of time. And I'm going to put up an image of one town in the US, for example, where this is actually happening, where the town was literally abandoned because of all the fires that are burning below the surface. In this one American town, and for years now, that you cannot inhabit that. If you tried touching the concrete on some of the roads, it will burn your hand if you did it with your bare hand. We know this is an existing phenomena, so this isn't new. Research scientists, for example, have for decades have shown that this kind of low temperature flameless combustion It can burn in the peat and other organic matter, such as coal, for months or years. Human activity has been directly contributed, for example, to massive fires burning out of control in Brazil. This isn't new. Analysts looking at the fires in Brazil have directly placed the blame on the Brazilian president, Berlusconi. His rhetoric, his dismantling of conservation forest policies, his encouragement of rampant, out of control logging and active deforestation to create grazing land for beef or for logging has caused monumental environmental disaster. Again, this isn't theory, this is reality happening now. The amount of smoke that had, never mind the fires themselves, but the result of the fires, the smoke has blanketed thousands of square hectares of land. It has choked out populations in the area. The Amazon is currently experiencing a drought triggered by El Nino and the warming of the North Atlantic, which is another issue I'll get to in a minute. But environmental researchers have always said that this year the drought is actually considered mild. However, if next year the drought continues and nothing is done to check the rampant deforestation, the situation becomes far worse. The Amazon fires are displacing hundreds, if not thousands, of natives and local wildlife. It just boggles the mind. It's devastating thousands of square kilometers of irreplaceable wetlands. And this is not due to an accident or some natural condition. This is due directly by the setting of fires. And they have gone out of control. In California, right now, today, fires are the worst this year since they've been recording the events. According to the LA Times, air and sea temperatures are hotter, fires are bigger, more destructive, air quality is the worst in decades. In recent weeks, dozens of wildfires have ignited across the state, some by lightning storms, others by, again, human activity. In one large fire in particular was caused by so-called gender reveal party. Are you fucking kidding me? In the middle of a wildfire season, you're telling me that some moronic idiots decided they couldn't just send out a freaking card with the sex or let the surprise, it's a boy or a girl. But a gender reveal party literally caused one of the worst fires, and this isn't the first time this has happened. And I was going to hold my thoughts on that, but holy crap, what were you thinking? Shake your head, and I hope the full extent of the law slams down on these people, because that was a moronic thing to do. These fires threaten to burn rural and outlying suburban communities to the ground. They've already caused billions of dollars across the state in damage. Guess where those billions are coming from? They're coming from your tax dollars. They're coming from insurance payouts. Insurance companies are going to raise their rates or just completely cancel people's rates and policies altogether. You are looking at a massive feedback loop, mostly caused because of climate change, caused by lightning and water, natural causes, but exasperated by climate change, and some have been caused by human stupidity. The smoke right now is so thick and spreads to vast areas of the state that it's actually blanketing cities in a choking, smoggy haze. Pictures, video, eyewitness accounts show that an orange and even red sky covers parts of San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley. Ash rained down all over the state. The ash alone is causing horrendous respiratory complications for many people that already suffer from respiratory illness. You have, again, even nowhere near the physical fires, you have the side effects of those fires through the ash, damaging air conditioning units. Your just vehicles alone are having to go into repair shops to get them completely gutted and cleaned as far as air filters and cleaners and this sort of thing. Again, that costs money out of somebody's pocket. Excuse me. Warming oceans, changes to the ocean currents, rise in sea levels, melting Arctic ice and Antarctic ice, melting glacial ice in Greenland and the Canadian Arctic Sea Pack, all point to changes in climate. Now, yes, some people, deniers primarily, are going to point out that, wait, this stuff, melting ice, glaciers melting, this stuff happens all the time. No shit, Sherlock, but the extent to which this is happening over the last 2-3 dozen years is not a natural phenomenon. We know it's not a natural phenomenon. We've studied melting ice for hundreds of years. Glacial researchers have, since the 1800s, have traveled to many parts of the world with glaciers and have measured their progress. When I was in school in the 70s, even in grade school in the early 70s, one of the things we learned was glaciers move forward over the winter, retreat over the summer. It's a natural thing. However, what we're seeing now, again, over the last few dozen years, and it's increasing, is glaciers are not moving forward. They're not rebuilding the ice pack. They're not rebuilding their mass. They're actually retreating at horrendous levels as never seen before. And you cannot say, again, this is guesswork or fake anything. The frickin' evidence is right there on the ground. The ice packs have receded. You can now have transient shipping going through the Canadian Arctic waters almost all year round. That's how bad it is. The changes in climate on a localized and a global level have accelerated in the past 100 years. This is not anecdotal, as I said. It's fact based on global studies over the past 100 years. The studies have looked at climate and environmental changes back to thousands of years of Earth history. The evidence is conclusive that Earth is getting hotter and human activity is the cause of the acceleration. Again, it's not a theory. Since the early 1800s, when industrialization began, we have seen temperatures around the world climb. Global temperatures since then have risen between 1 and 2 degrees, and closer to 2 degrees in some specific areas, 1 degree in others. Now, hold on, that's only a degree. Who cares? Think about it for a second. Think about the energy requirements on a global scale, the fucking planet, people, where 1 degree, how much energy do you think it takes for a 1 to 1.5 degree temperature rise in the air temperature? Never mind the sea temperature, that's a different kettle of fish, that's even worse. But the air temperature alone, the amount of energy that is on a global scale that's required boggles the mind. You, the average viewer, is not going to be able to figure out the math because it is massive. The energy level is off the scale. That's how bad it is. That's how much energy it takes to raise it. So the amount of energy that's gone into climate change, human-caused climate change, staggers the mind. None of that is disputed by any reputable scientist or researcher in the field of environment, geology, climatology, chemistry, archaeology, and other fields within the scientific and research community have all peer-reviewed massive reams of data over the decades, going back to the 1800s, looking at core samples well into going back to the Precambrian era. Okay, so we're talking hundreds or thousands of years of study, of data. This is what we are seeing now. Every single respectable scientist agree. There are some, of course, so-called quasi-experts that have sold out for money or have zero ethics whatsoever, and or are so out of their depth that they're willing to prop up the naysayers. But leaving those aside for a moment, why in general terms do some in the population, the business community, government bureaucracy, and leadership around the world persist in denying the reality? Well, there are many reasons for that denial. For example, one is that since 1957, for example, we've known about a rise in CO2 levels. We've known that since 1957, human activity has caused a rise in CO2 levels. We understand the link between fossil fuel use and the rise in CO2 levels. And the knowledge actually came about as a direct research study by the in-house research and science team at Humble Oil, which is now ExxonMobil. The study was paid for, commissioned by Humble Oil. The company buried the research and refused to admit it. Government officials knew about the link between burn-in fossil fuel use and rise in CO2 levels, but said and did nothing. Now let's clarify something here. When I say government officials, I'm primarily talking about more of a senior bureaucrat, less of the elected politicians. I have no doubt that some cabinet level politicians were aware and said nothing. That doesn't surprise me in any way, shape, or form. But only those at the top levels and across party lines. The vast majority of politicians were either unaware, most likely unaware, or blissfully unaware, had some inkling of something going on, might have heard rumors within the hallways of, whatever, but decided, not my job, and I don't want to make waves, so I'm not going to say anything. But I digress. In this case, the denial is all about money. The denial, the reason for hiding the truth is well documented, yet doing nothing because they think the public will be either tempted to spend less on their product or support alternatives. Cleaner fuels, electric. In fact, we can look at the well-documented and irrefutable evidence that it's already been validated through the courts on the decades-long effort of ExxonMobil and other oil companies, their knowledge and subsequent denial of climate change. Greenpeace, the Center for International Environmental Law, Inside Climate News, the Los Angeles Times, and a number of other investigative researchers have cataloged years of research, thousands of pages of documents that show how Exxon did everything it could to stifle the truth about the direct link between fossil fuels and the rise in CO2 and climate change. Or it muddied the waters by releasing documents that falsely claimed the science of climate change is inconclusive. An example of that took place in 1996 when the then CEO of ExxonMobil, Lee Raymond, in a speech to the Economic Club of Detroit, denied there was any scientific consensus on climate change. He said, and I quote, "Currently, the scientific evidence is inconclusive as to whether human activities are having a significant effects on the global climate." Bullshit. Even knowing that his own researchers and scientists proved conclusively years before that human activity through the use of increased fossil fuels was having a direct impact on the environment and thus on the population itself. Billions of dollars around the world is spent on lobbying governments to deny climate change. Now, let's get something straight. Climate change just isn't about the environment, as in the poor wallaby, koala, deer, whatever. It isn't about the animals or the trees and the fish and all the rest of it. Because who the hell do you think lives in those same areas? People, you freaking idiots! Now look, changes in the environment, negative changes in the environment, affect people. Smog in the air affects people's lungs, their ability to breathe. Do you know how much money is spent on healthcare on a global scale just to combat the health effects of climate change? Trillions of dollars, never mind billions, hundreds of trillions of dollars on a global scale, both from private pockets, as in you're paying for it. One example is the US. They don't have public health care like we do in Canada, and so most of what's coming out of their pocket literally is coming out of their pockets. They're paying for those illnesses in their hospitals. They're going broke. They're mortgaging houses down in the US. They're giving up entire livelihoods in the US because of their healthcare costs. And a massive chunk of the healthcare budget in every single country, whether it's like Canada, where it's a single payer system, where it's, call it what you will, socialized medicine, or whether it's private for-profit healthcare, you're paying for it one way or another. The environment that you live in, if it's affected in a negative way, will also affect you as an individual and your family in a negative way. But just getting back to the billions of dollars spent around the world lobbying governments to deny climate change, all for the sake of continuing to profit from human ignorance. Money, profit is one of the biggest reasons for climate change denial. Now, that's just from a corporate standpoint, from a one percenter with a hand in the till standpoint. Because let's face it, some government officials, bureaucrats, and politicians in a number of countries that we all know and love are profiting very nicely. Thank you very much, Senator so-and-so. And, you know, this is not guesswork. This has been investigated by many reputable news outlets, not media outlets, but news outlets, research. Legal teams of hundreds of people have, over the last few years, dug deep and found very interesting things. But getting back to what I was saying, that's the denial from a monetary perspective on people and companies that have a direct link to the effects of that. Another reason for denial of climate change, though, is related to the acquisition of profit. Acquisition of profit. That's actually a Star Trek episode in there. Hint, hint, the Ferengi. Okay, I'm a geek. I can't help that. You knew I was going to say something geeky at one point. But getting back to my point, the other reason for the denial of climate change related to the acquisition of profit is that of misdirection. It's when companies are directly contributing to climate change, yet spread doubt about climate change. They use doublespeak, creative technobabble, data taken out of context, and outright lies. What use, for example, coal? Have you ever burned coal? Have you ever seen what's left after you burned coal? It's a sticky, tar-like mess that gets into groundwater and poisons life downstream. Burning coal also emits an immense amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. What you th- what exactly do you think coal is made from? It's almost entirely made from carbon. What do you think happens when you burn carbon? Carbon dioxide is CO2, people. It's not a magical gas that just comes out of nowhere. The emissions have been shown, that CO2 increase, that carbon dioxide level has been shown to increase the greenhouse effect in the atmosphere and lead to global warming and climate change. And by the way, global warming is not climate change, and climate change is not global warming. One is not synonymous with the other. Global warming was a really bad reporter years ago who reported a scientific study about climate change, where the key point of that study, by the way, was on the warming of the earth. So this idiot decided to just run with that aspect of it, and that created this misnomer that global warming is climate. We're warming up, we're warming up. Well, there's an issue there where deniers will capitalize on. And that's why it's not global warming as such, it's climate change, it's change in the climate. Now, before I go on, just to be clear, a change in the climate is not necessarily about the planet heating up, but it creates that change, whether it's slight or whether it's large, will create extremes in weather. We have seen extremes in weather. Tornadoes and hurricanes are getting not only more numerous over the last 5 or 6 dozen years, they're getting more violent over that period of time. Trillions of dollars of damage, not billions, trillions of dollars of damage. Basically, that number is corroborated by insurance companies around the world on the amount of damage that these storms create. That's coming out of your pocket again. That's part of climate change. Climate change says that certain parts of the world will actually get colder. Parts that should not be getting as cold as they are becoming cold. Parts of the world that have drought are seeing more moisture. Parts of the area that should be getting more rain are getting less rain. It's becoming drier. It's changing the climate. That's what climate change is about. Overall, ocean temperatures are increasing at an astronomical level. And again, if you think that, as I said before, the vast amount of energy that's required to change the air temperature 1 to 1.5, 2 degrees over a period of time, if you think that's vast, and that's horrendous amount of energy, if you think that's large, the amount of energy it takes to change the temperature and salinity and the currents within the oceans, wow. If you don't understand that, if you cannot fathom that kind of energy requirement, one, you're not alone, but if you're going to deny that it exists, you might as well leave the planet now, because you've completely lost your mind if you think that that doesn't take any energy at all, if you think that that's inconsequential. But getting back to what I was saying, burning coal also increases methane, which over a 20-year period has been shown to, there was 87% more potent as a greenhouse gas than CO2. So burning coal not only releases carbon, but it releases CO2 as well. This is not a theory. It's not guesswork. It's been proven time and time again. But coal companies are also spending billions on lobbying governments around the world and have spent billions on getting you to believe that coal is not the monster it's been. Ever heard of clean coal? It doesn't exist. It's the idea that coal, the oldest, dirtiest energy source that we have as a species, could be somehow reshaped in a way that allows us foolish humans to keep using it without doing much, if any harm at all, to the environment. It's clean coal, people. The term's been around since the 1980s, and people, yes, people just like you, have bought into this fallacy. It doesn't work. There's no such thing as clean coal because coal is not in itself, by its very nature, clean. It can never be clean. In the US, companies and special interest groups funded by the coal industry excuse me, claim that clean coal is, not just because it's clean, is catering to the right wing by saying it's your duty to use coal. It's patriotic as red, white, and blue. Horse shit. It has nothing to do with patriotism. It has to do with the almighty friggin' dollar that these companies are raking in because you, being gullible as hell, keep supporting these places. Everyone has known for hundreds of years that coal is a dirty, smelling, polluting substance. Coal miners have died of horrendous deaths of black lung disease as far back as they've been mining this stuff. It's caused by long-term exposure to coal dust. Back in the 40s and 50s, coal companies even tried to convince, and did convince, consumers that by coloring their coal blue coal, it would not only be safer for you, but burn cleaner. Blue coal became the rage. You've been lied to, and by denying climate change, you bought into that lie. Deniers have been convinced by a very slick, well-placed campaign that's cost billions of dollars and lives, and it's based on human psychology and brainwashing. The campaign is insidious and long-term. It's essentially based on wearing you down and wearing down the subject by selectively substituting what you think you know with false truths and techno junk. It changes your mind without you even knowing. It's how propaganda works, people. The companies, individuals, and general public that are promoting the denial of climate change have also tried to use dozens of myths to avoid the simple truth. They've said, for example, over the years that climate change is fake because climate's changed before. Well, yes, climate reacts to whatever forces at that time, and it changes over time. Humans are now the dominating force. It's the sun. That's what's causing the Earth to warm up. In the last 35 years of global warming, the sun and climate have been going in opposite directions. The temperature gradient from the sun has actually decreased over that same period of time, while the temperature of the Earth has increased. They've also said, there's no consensus. Yes, there is. 97% of respected and legitimate climate researchers, scientists, specialists, after exhaustive peer-reviewed studies, not paid for by corporations, agree that humans are causing climate change and the warming of the Earth. Look, in the end, people are denying the existence of climate change by buying into the greed of self-interest companies and government officials. Denying climate change is supporting the groups that have used expensive and effective psychological brainwashing on you. Denying climate change is akin to closing your eyes and hoping that you're right and that the evidence, research, observation, and reality around you is somehow wrong. I know I'm not going to change your mind, but if you stop and pay attention, very close attention, and I mean really close, to who is sponsoring the message you're believing in, you may end up changing your own mind. But you have to be honest with yourself when you see it and be willing to open your eyes to the truth, because no one else is going to change your mind for you except you. And the truth is a tough pill to swallow for many people that are denying climate change. Unfortunately, It's something that I can't help you see. You have to go and look. But one thing for sure, and I mean this with all sincerity, pay very close attention to who is paying for these studies. If it's not a university, if it's not consumer groups, or even then, if it's consumer groups or university, pay attention to the message. Because sometimes you may see something in that message that says, wait a minute, why is ExxonMobil, why is Shell, why is BP, why is just the Republican Party or this Republican think tank or this conservative group paying for this study, and this study just happens to agree with what they say without any discontent, without any dissent in voice? They don't show both sides of it. A true study will actually show both sides of an argument and actually explain and lay it out. Sometimes they get too technical with it, but if you take your time to interpret what's said, you can figure it out. But don't take my word for it. You have to look at it yourself. All right? Now, let's get a little bit lighter, and we're going to talk about recycling. Now, this is going to be a really quick part. The recycling issue has to do with what you think you're actually recycling. One of the problems that I've found out recently is that I'll put plastic that is recyclable in my blue box. Where I live, it's a yellow box. And I will put it out on the curb on garbage day, trash day. And they'll come by and collect the bins, and off it goes. And I don't see it anymore, and I figure, oh, I've done my part for the environment. And guess what? Recycling is going to happen, and those empty bottles and cans and whatever will come back as other things. Unfortunately, that's not actually happening. It's a very tiny percentage of what's actually getting into the blue box, that whether it's paper recycling or plastic and metal recycling, it's actually a very small percentage. The rest is either getting into the landfills, which you're supposed to be keeping it out of by recycling, or it's being put in shipping containers and being shipped to other countries, mostly third world, as a matter of fact, always third world countries. Recently, as last year and the beginning of this year, in Canada, we were embarrassed, and we should be embarrassed, where in the Philippines and a couple of other countries, shipping containers that have been sitting on the docks in those countries for weeks, months, in a couple of cases, a couple of years, with a rotten, vile stench coming from them, was sent back to Canada. And the reason they were sent back to Canada is they were full of plastics that were supposed to have been destined for recycling plants. They never got there. We need to pressure, you need to pressure the bureaucrats, governments of all stripes, every political party, every member of parliament, every senator. You need to tell them, stop with the recycling bullshit. If you're going to have people recycle, then you need to crack down on these companies that are allowed to do this. If we can only recycle a certain percentage of plastics and paper, then stop lying to the public. Tell the public we can only recycle this much. Be honest with the public, and maybe you'll get more buy-in into recycling. Maybe people will actually start reducing what you use. Because I'll tell you right now, part of recycling is reducing. It's part of the 3 R's. Reduce, recycle, reuse. If we keep buying this crap and companies keep wrapping this shit in plastics that cannot be recycled, It's going to continue to end up in landfills, or it's going to be dumped in the ocean, which doesn't friggin' help because that's another issue. And or it's going to end up in one of these third world countries where nothing happens to it because it doesn't get recycled there any more than it does here. It sits around and pollutes their waters and their water table and their land and their environment. It's wrong of us to do that. Every single person should get on the politician and bureaucrats and companies that are supposed to be recycling. We need to let them know. We need to send them a message. Enough with the crap. Stop lying to the public. Not everything gets recycled. The public, you need to wake up and stop putting crap you know shouldn't be recycled, or at least you should know that can't be recycled, into the bins. Because part of the problem is you, us, me. We don't read, we don't learn, we don't study. The governments, local municipalities will send out lists of things specific to what you can and cannot recycle. And yet I have walked past when I walk my puppy, and every single one of the bins, I see stuff that cannot be recycled. Yet it's in there. We all have done it. We all do it. And people are going to continue to do it if we don't wake up now. So please, pay attention to what you're recycling. Don't put stuff in the bins that are not supposed to be in the bins. 2, reduce what you're using, because the reality is, if we don't reduce it, it's not going to get recycled, because again, only a certain percentage in some industries, less than 30% of the materials of recycled materials can be used to make new products that you're going to go out and buy either locally or through Amazon or some other company. Buy local first before anything else. Just throwing that in there. But in the meantime, though, you need to look at these things. I am not going to depress you anymore, because the other half of this show, and it's going to be a short one, but we're going to just I'm going to do a brief shout out to Claudia Christian and her book, Babylon Confidential. And in my humble opinion, is coming up. Okay, so be right back. Don't go anywhere. And we're back. I had a little bit of a technical difficulty, so we're actually shooting this segment a little bit later in the day, but it's all good. One of the things we're going to look at now is, again, just a very brief recommendation of a book. It's called Babylon Confidential, a memoir of love, sex, and addiction. And it's by Claudia Christian. And I first got introduced to this book back in 2012. It's not a new book, but I think especially with the pandemic and the lockdown in a lot of different places, that people are somewhat feeling stressed and removed, and some have turned to whatever vice they've had, but that vice becomes an addiction that is very difficult to get rid of. And I've never had that kind of addiction. Full disclosure, I don't really drink other than a couple of glasses of wine a year. The odd beer and, Long Island iced tea, that kind of thing. But back in 2012, I had interviewed a Australian author, Morgan Grant Buchanan, and he is the co-author of Babylon Confidential with Claudia Christian. And Claudia Christian, for those that don't know, and how could you not know, especially if you are a geek, is Commander Susan Ivanova on Babylon 5. I loved that show when it was on, and She was one of my favorite characters, of course, but that's not why I like the book. Essentially, the book itself is it's about her addiction and how she beat the addiction, or at least how she became sober, kicked the drugs, kicked the habits, and the destructive behavior that and the path that she was on. It starts off with her life just before before she's 17, and she had that troubled upbringing. Moves to Hollywood, but then runs into other issues that exasperated her her life. But she also struck gold to a certain extent by landing a part in Dallas. And some of you might, be slightly older-ish, 30 plus, might remember Dallas evening soap opera as opposed to daytime soap opera. Wasn't my cup of tea, but when she made it to Babylon 5, well, hey, she's hot. Come on. How could a young lad like myself, a geek and all, not appreciate her on Babylon 5? But she also brought a certain strength to her character. And I think in this book, I felt it actually, it showcased why and how she brought that strength to her character, Commander Ivanova, on Babylon 5. But it follows her alcohol, fuel sessions, the inappropriateness, shall we say, and I'm being very polite here, of certain other people in her sphere of influence, and her affairs and love life. But again, it's sort of this roller coaster ride that descended into the alcohol addiction and trying to escape her life. But at the same time, the book is an inspiration because it also talks about how she reclaimed her life. And it talks about the Sinclair method that that she's used and promoted. It's really not the kind of book that I read. I don't do memoirs, and I don't do this sort of nonfiction or this nonfiction book, or this type of nonfiction book. But it is one that I would recommend, and it's definitely worth the read. It's not the only book she's written, and I'll throw a few other books up here that you can see. But it's while it's not the only book, it's well written. It's a story well told. Anyway, Babylon Confidential, a memoir of love, sex, and addiction. I think it's well worth the read. Again, it's not a new book. It was published back in 2012. It's available in almost every, Kohl's, Indigo, Kobo, Amazon. It's available in a number of different chapters in Canada. But definitely, it's worth the read. And for the geeks, there's a little bit of Babylon 5 in there that you might find interesting. It does have that sense of humor that she has, and it tells that important story with the message through her eyes. Anyway, check it out, and I'll be right back. And in my humble opinion, the fast food generation, life in 5 minutes or less. Now, this next segment, in my humble opinion, I'm just going to do a brief little thing on, and hopefully you find it humorous, but at the same time, hopefully you find it enlightening to a certain extent. The fast food generation, life in 5 minutes or less, is an essay that I did a few years back, but I find it's apt even today, and it has been since I wrote it. Essentially, it's not about self-help. It's not about fast food. It's not about generation W, X, Y, or Z. And it's not about a generation gap as it actually spans every generation today. It's what I call the fast food generation. It's a condition, a state of mind where impatience, exasperation, annoyance causes people to rush through life as fast as they can, where we live our lives traveling faster than the speed of light. Think of this more of a reflection and not so much as a rebuke to our daily routine. After all, who am I to pass judgment on something that I'm equally guilty of? It seems, however, that as a species, humans have an ingrained genetic tendency to rush through life in what can only be called a futile attempt at squeezing out 25 hours in a 24-hour day. We've become a collective generation of impulsive, hurried individuals. We want life in 5 minutes or less, hence the fast food generation. Can you remember a time when life was actually lived at a slower pace? Before fast food and hurrying to get here or there, before the catchphrase 30 minutes are free came about? If you can remember that, you're actually lying to yourself, because even back in those days, if you take it in context of the day, we were still just as rushed and hurried. But in retrospect, looking back, we only see what we want to see. We think it was a better life. We think it was a slower paced life. It wasn't. People were just as hurried. People were just as rushed, if not more so, because theoretically, technically, they didn't have the same sort of conveniences that we have today. We're in a rush to find the time to accomplish more in each minute of every day, and I'm sure we're not getting there wherever there is any faster. The whole idea about not enough hours in a day, by the way, this isn't new. Again, if you remember, really remember from back in the day, we used to say it back then. And when I say back in the day, I'm talking, I can remember back in the 60s and 70s, more the 70s in my generation. But you heard older people talking about, oh, back in my day. Yeah, back in your day, it might have been the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, but you were still just as rushed. We can start our search by attempting to understand the necessity for speed, to be honest. I'm not sure we'll ever understand the necessity of speed, but I digress. Let's try, however, by beginning where most of us begin, the morning routine. The sun is beginning to crest on the horizon of an apartment building, and east as the dawn of a new day begins. And Monday morning has arrived in all its glory. You've already hit the snooze button a half a dozen times, trying to eke out more of that precious morning sleep as you tentatively open one sleep-encrusted eye and peek at the time on the clock radio, and the first words out of your mouth is, shit! You dash out of bed since you've already showered last night. No need to shower and worry about it now. You take a quick spritz of the deodorant, if you will, and you tear into the bathroom, run your head onto the tap, at the same time brush your teeth in 4 nippy strokes. Time to hurry through breakfast if you have breakfast. Otherwise, you're going to be driving through a drive-through somewhere at a Timmy's or whatever to grab breakfast. Sometimes skipping or you skip the most important meal of the day. When you do eat, it's a pre-made, prefabricated, pre-cooked, with the slogan "Eat on the Run" printed on the box, or you just removed from the freezer, or it's still the pre-made, prefabricated, pre-cooked meal, but this time you're getting it through a drive-through, and they've already taken it out of the box. You run to work because you wouldn't want to miss the bus to attend that meet, an appointment, or some other first light crisis at the office, like changing your voicemail to say that you're in and that you're too busy to take the call. If that scenario isn't bad enough, I have personally seen coworkers running at breakneck speed to catch an elevator, Not just to push the button to call the elevator, to call for the lift, but the wind created by colleagues dashing past almost knocks you over. And when they get there, they're pushing the button multiple times, as if that's going to call the lift even faster. You just have to push it once. I ask myself, when did pushing the button become an Olympic sport? By the time I wake up and I stood beside, the person, she's still frantically, or could be he, still frantically pressing the call button. Turn, smile, quietly wonder if pushing the button repeatedly makes somehow the elevator comes faster. Like I said, of course, however, I already know the answer, it doesn't. But still I stand in amazement at the sight that's playing out in front of me. Once on the elevator, the door is open, not quite fast enough for whoever the person is. My colleague bangs in the door, rushes, presses the floor number. In my curiosity, I ask, what's the rush? I have to pee, they say, as they squeeze their knees together, in a panic grin trying to creep across her face. I look at the flash of numbers, slowly counting through each floor, slowly counting. I figured in for a gram, in for a kilo, and I press my luck so she won't mind one more question. Why didn't you go before you left home? The response was, because I was in a hurry. She's now running out the open door on whatever floor she gets off at, heading towards the washroom down the hall. If she had taken the 30 seconds to go before that, she wouldn't have been in such a hurry. I mean, I have to bite my tongue at this point in time to avoid laughing my head off. Inside the office, the next deadline looms as I quickly scan through my phone. I look around and I see other people checking their calendars, trying to figure out, trying to get some enlightenment as to what's ahead, a crystal ball of sorts on how we can speed up the day, allowing us to return home, wait for it quickly to get supper ready for the kids or the partners. On Monday, we wish it was Friday. On Wednesday, we wish we had more time to finish the work we had on Monday. And on Friday, we can't wait for the day to end to start the weekend. We seem to be in a rush through the week as if it wasn't fast enough already. When the week is over, it's time to relax, take life easy. But no, can't do that. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves here because we still have to clean the house. You didn't think the toilets and the sinks and the cabinets were going to clean or, the floors sparkle on their own, did you? It's also, don't forget the laundry. We don't want to leave it all for the precious weekend time, right? Okay, it's Saturday morning. There's still time to salvage a beautiful weekend if you rush through getting the house cleaned. The stuff that you didn't finish Friday night after you got home from rushing from work. So much for relaxing. At least the kids can relax a bit from their busy life at school or some cases work. They're on the computer chatting to the cousins in Edmonton or wherever. HRU, IC, LOL, SUP, GR8, OIC, PLZ, GF, LOL again. You get any of that? Because I sure as hell didn't. When I text, by the way, I use full words. The big words, big grown-up words that I learned when I was a kid. But it's at the point where even the kids' daily lives and speech and text is shorthand. It's a new lexicon for speeding up their life. Speed, after all, is vital to the new form of communication. Even the kids are not immune. By the way, if you want to know what they were saying, don't ask me, talk to your kids. I see no clues to what it all means. I don't get it. We start our lives in a rush the second we're born. Let's face it. What new mother, and I know a couple recently, and congrats, Andrea, and Sarah, soon to be. But what new mother hasn't shouted, get this effing kid out of me now? Especially after they're late by 10, 12 days. Maybe this is when our goal for a hurried life begins, at birth. It's akin to the chicken and the egg, really. Which came first? Was it the adult mother or infant child at the moment of taking that first breath of air that begins the race? Talk about being in a rush. Mind you, who can blame the mother for wanting to push and rush at birth? Trying to push something the size of a bowling ball through a vagina is enough to make most stoic individuals do it in a hurry. Dragging out childbirth really isn't an option from what I've been told. The act of giving birth, by the way, is really the first time we see the beginning of the parent-child conflict. A parent wanting to hurry along their children who really doesn't want to rush the process, but takes his or her own sweet time moving through the birth canal. You'll see similar scenarios playing itself out many more times when the child is living at home. This, of course, is our time for children or for us to take time with our children. But as I was saying, from birth, we're born with the gene to be in a rush. As babies, they want their food right away, whether it's breast milk or strained prunes. When it's feeding time, they let you know with a set of lungs that will break the decibel level of a sonic boom. If they want their diapers changed right away, the signal is very similar to that of give me food immediately. Come to think of it, it's the same set of lungs, and much of that, what that little human infant uses to let us know they want something. As children grow, the need for speed also grows exponentially. Except, of course, in their teen years when you're trying to wake them for school or some other event that you're late for. This is the part where the parent-child conflict, which I'm not going to dwell on, comes back into play. But that's a topic best left for another short essay. I know, I strayed off the point again. Let's just say that children learn from us, the parental units. This is their need for instant gratification, just as it is our need for instant gratification. Fast cars, fast women, fast food, it's all the same. Even music is getting faster. If you're over 40, you can remember vinyl records playing hits from the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin, Cars, Styx, and on and on and on. But the average song played by most musical groups ran 4 to 6 minutes. Today, the average running time for a compact disc or MP3, compact disc for some of you is actually still older than most, and some of you wouldn't even know what an LP is, but anyway, I digress again. But a 6-minute song, most of you under 30, under 20 couldn't understand that because they sing so fast. The songs are essentially 2.5 to 3 minutes max. And that's a really long song. And they're not even playing their own instruments at that point in time. Record companies want to sell more songs. They want to pack more in, more money, and give more to the radio stations to play more songs, all in an effort to make the money. The only way to do that is to shorten the songs, especially because the attention span of the people that are listening to a lot of these songs aren't really capable of listening to a longer song. But that leaves the artist with less time to convey any message he or she has within the lyrics. There's very few, if any, real new songs have musical riffs in it. You'll never see, a Queen type group come in where half the track is instrumental, which is kind of sad. The only way to remedy, though, the speed of the song, or to try and pack as much in, is where artists try to speed up the tempo of the songs. And I do get nostalgic for that slower pace when I could really enjoy the music. And of course, understand what the lyrics meant. I even enjoy a good guitar riff, drum solo. You don't see that anymore. Music takes up too much time and space on the track that it doesn't have the so-called artist going about singing about some lost love or something that most people really don't get themselves, even after listening to it. I have heard kids spewing out some of this crap that they're listening to, and I'm thinking, what the hell is that supposed to be? There used to be music videos. You still get them, but they're not what they used to be. But just as an example, I remember watching pop music groups from the late 70s and early 80s when music videos were, not only in its infancy, but really taken off. And I'd sit back in the recliner, gaze at the images as it flows across the console, which back in the 70s was a floor console television, furniture, if you will. In a 30-minute time slot, I might see maybe 10 groups with the visual rendition of their hit songs. Now, when my kids were kids in the early 90s, late 90s, they were bombarded by as many as 15 or 20 video hit songs from the exact same time period, that 30 minutes. The amount of violence you see in some of today's music video that's blasted by them on the screen so fast that the kids wouldn't even understand what they're seeing. So sometimes, I guess, in that sense, speeded up music crap might be a good thing. But life is full of shortcuts and quickies today. I guess that's my point. Which brings me to, especially on the topic of quickies, you know that I had to broach the subject at some point in time. Parents, cover your children's ears because, of course, you don't want them to hear, sex. See, I said it, sex. How many of you recoiled in shock? Anyway, I digress again. Now, all of you Puritan individuals or young children may as well skip down, fast forward. But fair warning. After all, you've already been asking yourself, is this guy going to get to the end at some point in time? I have things to do. Which kind of makes my point, if you see what I mean. Okay, just as us, or just for us, the naughty bits for the next couple of minutes, if that long. I'll try to keep it short, no pun intended. Sex and the act of, or subject of, is a two-headed issue. Again, no pun intended. In one hand, I have the male member, I swear I'm not trying to be funny, of society, and on the other, we have females. Both male and female. I am not, by the way, going to get into a debate as to the multiple other in-between options. This is not about that right now. This is about the generic male and female. So my apologies to the LGBTQ and whatever, you know what I mean. This is not about that. This is about the generic male and female. But in general terms, male and females have very different views on how they see their role in the particular subject of sex. And each one has a valid observation. In this case, however, we'll look at just the issue of speed, tempo, velocity, and momentum. There are far too many issues in between the sexes to review at this point in time, and really, we're not looking at that part just yet. We're just looking at the pace of life and how we live and lead those lifestyles. Most of those topics really don't fit in any ways to this conversation. It would make for another really interesting conversation, though. But I did visit an adult superstore on more than one occasion. And to my amazement, and for those who've never been in an adult store, there are hundreds of sex aids and toys of all varieties for both men and women, where when you read the labels of the toys, this is where it really gets interesting. You see one main theme. It's not what you think, you dirty-minded individual. It's about how to give yourself or your partner pleasure in the shortest amount of time possible. When did the act of sex become rushed? It's not supposed to be rushed. All right, let me change up that question a bit. Because I'm sure right now there are several women that are saying, you're kidding, right? And I already know where you're going with that thought, and you're absolutely correct. Ladies, I'm not referring to the men who, let's face it, seem to have a habit of falling asleep, leaving you hanging, and of course, disappointed. I'm speaking in general terms. I'm in my 50s, but I prefer my metric age, 30s. And only a few years ago, saw the pleasure of taking things slow. And the manufacturers and purveyors of these toys are trying to sell me fast food. Nothing is safe from the need of instant fulfillment anymore. Never mind the stereotype joke about the man finishing his bit first while his partner's still waiting for it to begin. See, I did mention it anyways for you ladies who are still upset because you realize you have a valid point, and it's true. But nothing is safe anymore. Even death has become fast food. I've seen articles in the past about drive-through funeral parlors. How do you speed up burying someone? I can see it now. You die in your sleep at a ripe old age, and around the city is your family's choice of drive-through burial stores. They wrap you up in plastic, shove you in a giant paper sack, bring you up to a takeout window. Will there be flowers with that? The smartly dressed clerk at the window asks. Your relative responds, no, but do you give air miles? Each car in the funeral procession will speed through the viewing, where you're propped up against the glass like yesterday's donuts on display. The fastest funeral on record, from what I've read, sounds silly, doesn't it? But it's happened. It's happening now. We're at the point where we need more speed. Once you begin to have drive-through funeral parlors, who's to say what comes next? Drive-through circumcisions? I don't think so, and I'm crossing my legs right now. You'll notice, though, that I left out the obvious, fast food. Other than to use it as a metaphor, and I did that on purpose because wherever there's a drive-through or takeaway or boil in the bag, drop in the oven or nuke in the microwave, food is always easy to pick on. I think that we've all seen this area in our lives get faster since the 50s when the first TV dinners were introduced. Manufacturers selling the latest conveniences in food preparation to anyone that has a kitchen. It was just, you should look at some of the ads. Turn on a television or the internet, videos, whatever, on the weekends or late night and watch a 1-hour commercial about how to cook a pot roast in 10 minutes. Or how to juice 20 apples, oranges, mangoes, and old shoes in less than a minute. It's no longer farmers selling us food, it's corporations selling us food. Very slick advertising and very slick, as I mentioned in the earlier segment, very slick psychological propaganda, in this case about food. They don't grow it anymore, they manufacture it. And along with food, these same companies will manufacture television, stoves, cars, and some even drill for oil. One company who, for legal purposes, I'm not going to mention their name, but they make a lovely scented line of men and ladies grooming products and shampoos and soaps and this sort of thing, along with a number of other non-cosmetic related items. I'm having difficulty in seeing the connection, however, between food and oil, other than we do have edible oil products. Whipped cream comes to mind out of a can. Maybe that's what it is. We also have refrigerators with built-in televisions and internet connections, and I'm still trying to make that connection as well. Our need to rush through life, in my humble opinion, is getting out of control. It's out of hand. We've forgotten how to relax and take life for what it is. Life is a wonder, a taste, a sight, a sound, an imagination. We're more stressed and get sick more often and have less sleep. Our daily routines have become chores and excitement is no longer savored. It's to do it fast and get to the next event. Look carefully at some of the marketing that's directed at you. It's all about speed. I think we're missing the boat on life when we forget to take our time. When we rush from one task to the next, we don't see life. We've missed things around us. And it's unfortunate because we really can't appreciate life when we don't take our time. It's a pity, really. As each generation is born and ages, they take a little bit of the habits and priorities of the previous ones, even if they don't admit it. But as they transit through life, through their life, they reach stages where they inevitably say, that's the old way, I can do it better and faster. The thing is, it shouldn't be about doing something just for the sake of speed, not when you've missed out on the intricacies and beauties of life around you. Yes, there are individuals that have savored that aspect of life, that take their time. They wake up in the morning, they have that cup of coffee, that tea, they look out on the sunset, they admire and feel the rays of light as it caresses their skin, the slight breeze, the smells of the summer, the crisp, cool air of the winter. They take their time. A fresh morning dew as it hangs off a delicate flower. The buzz and precision of hummingbirds drinking nectar at a blossom of flowers or lupins. Bright-eyed children playing together in a playground structure. Their infectious laughter mixing with sounds from nature. Lovers walking hand in hand along the side of a canal. Or the white wispy clouds flowing across a blue sky, dancing with a gentle breeze. Sometimes we need to slow down, catch our breath before we lose our ability to appreciate what's around us. Sometimes the best option is not to rush in the morning, but to value the morning, to watch the sunrise for a while. Sometimes we should welcome Mondays and think that Friday will come soon enough if we don't rush it. We should embrace our lives for what it is, a life that needs our own attention. We have to pay attention to our own life and those around us, to not be distracted and hurried. But don't take my word for it. Sit back, have that cup of coffee, have that cup of tea, and savor life, because it's the only one you have to give, in my humble opinion. All right, everybody. That's the show for today. It's a long one, I know. My apologies. I did ramble and I did berate a lot of people in that first segment, but it's important. Stay safe out there. Bye-bye.